Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Gigantic news on the SEC v. Ripple legal front yesterday, as news broke thanks to attorney Phelan, member of the XRP community, noting that Judge Torres ruled against the SEC's motion regarding the Hinman documents. So that means that all of the associated documents, including emails and drafts of the Ethereum free pass speech with Billy Boy Hinman from which he gave June 14th, 2018, we're going to see apparently all of that stuff. Absolutely gigantic news, and I talked about it at my very last video and shared some initial perspective from a number of attorneys within the community and some other people, including Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse. But the question is, when are we going to get to see this? And we know with not 100% certainty, but just about. In fact, attorney Jeremy Hogan and attorney James Phelan have both agreed that we need to watch for June 6th, 21 days from the ruling coming out, which was yesterday. And so I'll explain further. Also, I've got some additional comments and insight from attorney Jeremy Hogan, including some stuff having to do with fair notice defense and some other ins and outs in terms of what's been going on here. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so here's the headline from the Crypto Basic. Ripple v. SEC update. Lawyer reveals when Hinman docs will be made public. Attorney Phelan says the parties have 21 days from yesterday's ruling to file public, redacted versions of summary judgment documents. And in case you missed the news, regarding any potential redactions, it's not going to be anything of material substance. There were certain things having to do with, just individuals in terms of compensation and firms that, they were firms that individuals worked at, stuff like that. There could be little things like that would be redacted. But in terms of like the meat of this, our understanding at this particular point in time is that nothing is going to be redacted along those lines. So the meat of it, yeah, we're actually going to get to see that. That's what it looks like now. Piece continues. James K. Phelan, a former federal prosecutor, has shared an update on the timing regarding when XRP enthusiasts will see the documents the court recently ordered to be unsealed in the SEC v. Ripple lawsuit. According to Phelan, the parties have until June 6th, 2023 to publicly file the redacted versions of summary judgment documents. The parties are required to adhere to the court's September 12th, 2022 order, which mandates them to file the summary judgment documents in the public docket 21 days after the court decides their sealing request. And so, folks, this is something that the vast majority of us, including myself, wouldn't recall. Now, of course, there's so many moving parts of this damn case. How could a reasonable person expect anyone to reasonably recall something like that? Yet, as it turns out, attorney Phelan was still all over it with this, which just makes it that much more impressive. Man, that guy's mind is like a steel trap. I'm telling you, I'm impressed. So anyway, piece continues up. The seasoned lawyer who has closely followed the SEC v. Ripple lawsuit noted that June 6, 2023 is precisely 21 days from yesterday's ruling on the parties' sealing request. And he shared this document signed by Judge Annalisa Torres, September 12th, 2022. And for those of you that care to look, you can see where I'm moving my mouse right here. This is the relevant portion noting. So this was already set in stone. The SEC doesn't really have a say in this other than there's apparently an opportunity for appeal within 10 days. I might have a quote from Hogan on that. If I do, it'll be in one of these tabs up here and I'll get to it. But I did read that there's certainly some sort of opportunity where the entirety of this thing can be appealed, and then in theory, maybe that slows something down. But my understanding is that Judge Torres would have to some degree, approve of such a thing, and it doesn't seem probable that she actually would. So I don't know. There's some question marks there, but either way, what's most probable at this point is that we're going to actually have this material by June 6th. And it's kind of interesting to think, as interesting as that will be when it finally drops, it's actually quite possible, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but we actually could have the conclusion of the SEC v. Ripple case prior to this. Or at least, let me word it a different way. We could, because this is something that I think would be perhaps more probable, we could have Judge Torres' decision regarding the summary judgment motions from both sides. Because even if that comes out prior to June 6th, there's still an opportunity for a jury trial. There's a real possibility that could happen. I don't know if it's going to, nobody does, but it's certainly a real possibility. Now, the blockchain backer had a question for attorney Jeremy Hogan after attorney Hogan noted, yes, Phylon has the answer when we're going to see the Hinman emails. You can see it on screen here. Attorney Hogan agrees, yes, it's June 6th. And the blockchain backer wrote to him and said, hey, Jeremy, I've noticed most online coverage is focusing on Hinman emails and glossing over the rulings against Ripple. Based on my conversations, Judge Knepper's ruling is negative for Ripple. Some believe it reduces Ripple's chances of an outright win. Thoughts? And if he's and obviously it was Judge Torres, so I think that was a slip there. But here's the part of what he highlighted. Defendant's motion to seal. Oh, actually, you know what? Maybe he was right, and I just made a mistake because this decision actually initially came down from Judge Knepper, and so depending on where he pulled this document from, he actually could be right and I could be mistaken there. So I think I'm just going to retract that because I'm not actually 100% sure. Because obviously, Magistrate Judge Knepper is the one that handled all sorts of the discovery type stuff leading up to what would ultimately be trial if there is a trial, or leading up to, perhaps a summary judgment decision that would lead to some sort of finality there. So I retract that. Blockchain backer may be spot on in that it was Judge Knepper. So, but anyway, here's what it reads. Defendant's motion to seal is denied as to references linking Ripple's revenues with XRP sales, the amount of compensation that Ripple offered to trading platforms to list XRP, and the amount of Ripple's XRP sales targeted at investors through programmatic and institutional sales. And by the way, I'll note, it would get too into the weeds and too off topic for this video. I actually am going to address in a separate video this topic of Ripple offering cryptocurrency exchanges money to list XRP. But that's one of the things cited there. So Attorney Hogan shared the following thoughts on that particular question. Attorney Hogan wrote, hi, blockchain backer. I don't take anything from the order as to how the judge will rule, with one caveat. The order was only about what we are allowed to see. All of the evidence was already determined relevant. So you can't really read anything into the fact she says it's relevant here. One caveat. From her discussion of the Hinman emails, it seems to me that the judge has not ruled on the fair notice defense issue. And that could be because she hasn't got there yet. That's normally done last, but it could also mean she is not granting the SEC's motion. So that's something. So fine. Because look, there's no shortage of speculation, including from attorneys within the XRP community, that, yeah, as far as what Judge Torres is going to ultimately rule, she knows what it is. It's just a question of, is the document with that decision almost ready? Is it completely ready and she just hasn't released it yet? Where are we at on that? It's just, dotting I's, crossing T's. And if she's already come to all the major conclusions that she's going to come to, based on this, this could be some sort of indication that she's not granting the SEC's motion as it pertains to fair notice defense. And that would be interesting. Because, the only way that you get to fair notice defense is if something goes horribly wrong for Ripple and XRP holders as a result, effectively, as I've said many times over the last couple of years. Here you have XRP community member XRP Crypto Wolf responding to Attorney Hogan and says, considering how confusing the SEC has been with regulatory clarity for crypto, you would think Judge Torres would easily give the fair notice win to Ripple. Attorney Hogan wrote in response, keep in mind, Ripple never moved for summary judgment on the fair notice defense. It said that the fair notice defense should be decided at a jury trial. And then there was this from my fellow XRP YouTuber Mickel. He responded to the blockchain backer's earlier comment here and wrote the following. I don't see any of this as a big issue for Ripple. We all know they sell XRP. We all know they gave institutions discounts. I'm sure Ripple isn't jumping up and down to release this, but I don't see how it's necessarily bad for them. Yeah, and I think that is a fair point. We did already know of all this stuff, and we already, regardless of what comes out here, this is something that was already relevant in the case. That part was already determined. Now you have former SEC attorney Mark Fagel responding to Mickel and writing, it's the one part of the ruling that goes to the merits of Ripple's liability. The Hinman stuff will likely have bad optics for the SEC and may aid Ripple's defenses. But the only time the court cites Howey, it's in connection with Ripple's documents, but just reading tea leaves. And then Mickel responded, yeah, I think most people would agree that a 100% outright win for Ripple was unrealistic. I think they get slapped for early sales. I bet that's what's going on there. And that's very fair speculation. I mean, if you've listened to most of what I've said when talking about a potential outcome, I mean, I always acknowledge, of course I don't know. And fine, nobody knows, but I also am not an attorney. You know, I just play one on YouTube, right? So you may have noticed that a lot of times what I'll say is even if Ripple loses, that doesn't mean that we as XRP holders are screwed. You know, because there could be clarity for secondary markets. The reason that I typically note that is because I'm not completely convinced that Ripple will get out of this unscathed. I won't be surprised if there's some sort of ruling against them, but I'm still saying, even if so, what I'm most optimistic for and what's most important for us as XRP holders is that there is a path forward for XRP. There must be. Then there was also this from attorney Bill Morgan. He retweeted a comment from Mickel, that last one I shared with you, and wrote, Attorney Mark Fagel, can you see any basis for Judge Torres making a ruling that splits Ripple sales temporarily into a before/after period rather than by the type of sale, programmatic and institutional, versus to ODL customers? And so what he's getting at here is with the programmatic sales, those were paused years ago. And I believe that the reason for that, which is speculation, but I think pretty reasonable speculation, is that it would be easier for the SEC to argue that such transactions satisfy the Howey test versus institutional level transactions with ODL customers, much harder because you're talking about a utility use case there. So Attorney Morgan here is asking, you know, is Judge Torres, do you think there's a possibility that, you know, the judge splits Ripple sales temporarily into a before/after period? So we're looking at a timeline rather than just focusing on the type of sales in terms of programmatic versus institutional when coming to such a conclusion. And the answer from Attorney Fagel is yes. He actually does think that it's possible that Judge Torres could end up just looking at a point in time and just, you know, marking a pinpoint here before and after these are infractions, after not infractions. So here's what Attorney Fagel says. I could see that. There could be a finding based on evidence in summary judgment motion or at trial that some point Ripple was no longer engaged in a distribution of securities, but rather a sale of a product. But it would be odd since it's the same XRP. So we'll see what happens there. And then somebody named Courtney wrote the following. And was asking for help from Attorney Deaton and Attorney Hogan. And Attorney Hogan did respond. And so she wrote, dumb questions. I assume Judge Torres has already read through all the Hinman emails, so she and Ripple's legal counsel already know what's in those emails, right? The question mark, right? And two, when will Hinman emails be released to public? And so he simply wrote in response to number one, yes, just one word, yes. So yes, Judge Torres has already seen the Hinman emails and she's completely aware of what's in them. And then as far as number two, when will Hinman emails be released to the public? And this was the additional information that I thought I had in the video, and I do. So here's what Attorney Hogan said. The SEC has 10 days to move for reconsideration, so I assume Ripple is asking them about that today. If the answer is we are not, then they could be released sooner than I imagine. And so we ultimately found out that there was that 21-day threshold thing, but outside of that, apparently, the SEC can try to move against this, and they got 10 days to do so if they're going to. And if that happens, we'll just, we'll broach that topic when it comes. But that's the latest. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because if anything I say are right, that would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon family sedan.